Most people take years to figure out if they can retire. I'm going to show you exactly how it can be done in 30 days or less. The problem? Most people don't actually have a real plan. They're guessing. They pick an arbitrary retirement date. They withdraw money without a tax strategy. They assume their savings will last without stress testing for inflation, market crashes, or the loss of a spouse. It's your favourite Scotsman here again, and in the next 15 minutes, I'm going to show you step by step how to build a bulletproof retirement plan with $500,000. Before we can build a retirement plan, we need to know three things. What do you value most? What do you want your retirement to look like? And where do you stand financially? First, we define the lifestyle. Do you want to travel? Spend time with family? Volunteer? Golf 4 days a week? Or maybe sit at home and drink beers on the couch? Not advisable, but whatever floats your boat. Next, we nail down how much money you'll need each month to make that happen. Most people vastly underestimate this, forgetting about inflation, taxes, and unexpected costs. We also establish how your expenses might evolve over time, starting with the go-go years when you're active and spending more, then shifting into the slow-go years when things settle down, and finally the no-go years when healthcare and living costs may become the biggest factor. Next up, we gather all the financial pieces. This may seem like a lot, but to provide proper advice, you need the full picture. You wouldn't expect a doctor to prescribe medication without reviewing your medical history, would you? Same thing goes for retirement planning. Most people either don't know these numbers or just guess their way through. That's how you end up paying too much in tax, running out of money too soon, or leaving your family unprepared. Now that we know what you want and where you stand financially, let's talk about one of the biggest retirement decisions that gets the least amount of attention. Make no mistake, if you're sitting on a nest egg of $500,000 or less, CPP and OAS are going to make up the bulk of your retirement income. And what's not to like? The payments are guaranteed, and they go up each year as the cost of living increases. So, when should you take it? Depends on your circumstances, but if you're in good health, statistically, there's very good reason to consider delaying past 65. If we assume you'll get $1,000 a month by taking CPP at age 65, here is the difference between taking it at age 60 and at age 70. Pretty big. Another way to look at it is at age 60, you get $640. Wait just 1 year and it jumps to $712, which is an 11% increase, a double-digit return. Look, all this goes to say is don't make CPP and OAS an afterthought. Delaying's not for everyone. If you've got a large pension, for example, taking it early can be beneficial to stay under the OAS clawback range. But do the math, and then we can move on to what you all came for. The numbers. How much will you actually get if you retire in 30 days with $500,000? Well, you can answer that by clicking on the link in the pinned comments to get your free retirement guide, described by some as the best they've seen on the internet, or of course, you could just continue watching. Meet Ron and Sally. 60 years old, need about 70 grand a year to live on. Eligible for max CPP and OAS, no other sources of income, want to retire tomorrow. We have assumed a 5% investment return rate, which reflects a balanced investment strategy, an inflation rate of 2%, they take CPP and OAS at 65, and a life expectancy of age 95. Now, under these assumptions, Ron and Sally could expect to receive an after-tax, inflation-indexed annual income of just over $63,000 a year. We're a wee bit short though. So what if they delay their CPP and OAS? In this example, I've delayed CPP and OAS to age 68. Why only 68? Well, Ron and Sally fast run out of money otherwise. Their after-tax annual income goes up to just over $66,000 a year, but their investments are nearly drained. So after a wee bit of back and forth, they agree that they're going to take CPP at 65 so that they can maintain an investment portfolio and have some flexibility in the future. Now, I do want to point out a common mistake that I see here, and that is getting too carried away with your return assumption. Just because the S&P 500 has been going off like your uncle after a few too many at a wedding, it doesn't mean that the party lasts forever. Depending on what market you look at, the long-term stock market return is anywhere between 8 to 10% annually. Now, it depends on how your portfolio is allocated, but try and err on the side of caution and don't just jack up the return assumption just to make up the difference. As we talked about earlier, It's important to think about how your retirement income will evolve over time with the go-go, slow-go and no-go years. So, after further discussion with Ron and Sally, we established that they won't do as much travel after the early years. So at age 76, we reduced their annual income goal to $62,000, and then at age 86, we reduced that further to $55,000 a year. The impact? Well, it's still not ideal because they run out of money at age 76. So we're back to the drawing board again. Ron's a contractor, so it'd be quite easy for him to pick up some work on the side throughout the year. So where do we talk about what that might look like? Okay, so maybe somewhere between $20,000 to $25,000 a year. You can see here from the numbers that Ron's part-time work of just over $22,000 a year for 3 years, up to the age of 63, now has a retirement plan fully funded to provide $70,000 a year of spending from age 61 to 75, $62,000 a year to age 85, and then $55,000 a year to age 95. All it took was a few small tweaks, some flexibility, and a wee bit of strategy. Now, a few things we do need to look at. Ron and Sally's plan looks solid on paper, but what happens when life happens? The next step is to stress test their retirement against the biggest risks and to show you how to protect your own plan from falling apart. By far the biggest financial risk to Ron and Sally's retirement is if one of them passes away. Let's say Sally passes away at age 80. Her investments roll over to Ron, but her CPP and OAS are gone. Ron's expenses drop slightly to $4,000 a month, but it's not enough. He runs out of money by his mid-80s. At that point, his options are limited. Cut expenses, which is not always realistic, or use home equity, either by selling or taking a reverse mortgage. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of reverse mortgages. They come with fees and are often pushed on to seniors who don't fully understand them. They serve a purpose, but know exactly what you're getting into before considering one. The same applies here if one spouse needs long-term care. Depending on the level of assistance, costs can range from $4,000 to over $10,000 a month. Look, nobody wants to think about these things, but when it comes to planning your retirement, not doing so is negligence. Plan for the worst, hope for the best. And talking about the worst, you need to plan for what happens when the market crashes. What happens if your portfolio drops by 20% tomorrow? In Ron and Sally's case, it means the portfolio is wiped out by age 69. Hardly ideal. To make it up though, they would need to make a little over $50,000 a year in part-time income for 4 years to get their plan back on track. It's not ideal either, but it's also not the end of the world. Another way to mitigate this? Be flexible with withdrawals. When markets drop, use the emergency fund instead of selling at a loss. Downsizing or selling the home is another option. Another key risk to any retirement plan: inflation. If it runs at 3% per year, which is not unreasonable, instead of the 2% we've assumed in this example, the impact means running out of money at age 73. It would require a little under $48,000 a year in part-time income to age 65 to make up the difference. Again, not ideal, but not the end of the world. All this goes to say is that you don't have to sit there worried about what may go wrong all the time. That isn't a way to live. But at least acknowledging what could happen and having some sort of strategy as to how you might handle it is prudent. And talking about risks, the next one is the number one reason retirees run out of money. And most don't see it coming until it's too late. You can have the perfect retirement plan, but it means nothing if your investments aren't structured properly. A market crash can wipe out years of income, forcing you to drastically cut spending, or worse, go back to work. I've seen a number of comments in the comments section with people drawing 8% plus from their investments each year. I can only assume if you're drawing that much, then you have a fairly high allocation, or perhaps even 100% allocation to stocks. In 2008, the S&P 500 dropped 56% at its worst point. A $500,000 portfolio that is invested 100% in stocks has a high chance of being closer to $250,000 if we see a similar drop in the future. If you're drawing 8% a year on top of this, then your $250,000 is now closer to $210,000. You now need to get an almost 150% return just to get back to where you started. And that is without factoring in continued annual withdrawals. Even Warren Buffett is going to find that difficult. Alright, Scotsman, that's all great, but how exactly should a portfolio be positioned in retirement? Well, the non-committal answer to keep my compliance department happy is that it depends on your circumstances, how much risk you're willing to take, and your goals. Putting that aside though, I can say that you want to have as much global diversification as possible across multiple asset classes. Make sure you have a good allocation to stocks for continued growth. Outside of that though, here at Bellwether, most of our retired clients have at a minimum 30 to 40% in fixed income, alternatives, private equity, as well as positions in real estate and infrastructure. Alright, so we've established goals, spending needs and when to take CPP and OAS, stress tested the retirement plan and adjusted the portfolio asset allocation to be more appropriate for retirement. What else needs to be covered? In the example I outlined with Ron and Sally, our software had optimized the withdrawal plan. But if there's one thing I can tell you after retiring hundreds of clients over the years, it is that it will not always work out that way. Every year, you should be continually looking at tax optimization. Expenses will vary. Some years will be more than others. You may pick up some unexpected extra income some years, and your withdrawal strategy should adjust accordingly. Every May, we get all of our clients' tax returns. Every fall, we review the current year's income versus the previous year's. We then plan any extra withdrawals from RIF accounts for the current year and make sure the tax withholding for the year is in line with client expectations. The final adjustment is any changes we will implement to the following year's withdrawals. There's no one size fits all when it comes to what accounts to withdraw from and when. It's fluid and should be adjusted year to year. Doing so can save you tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands over a 30-year retirement. But optimizing your retirement, tax and withdrawal strategy is only one part of the equation. You also need to have a plan for what happens to your wealth after you're gone, which most people never do. Without the right estate plan, your family could end up paying unnecessary taxes, dealing with legal battles, or worse, fighting over your money. First, we review the basics. That means making sure your will and powers of attorney are up to date, checking that your RRSPs, TFSAs and insurance policies have the correct beneficiaries, and structuring your estate to minimise taxes and probate fees. One word of warning, don't let taxes dictate your decisions. They need to be considered but should not be the number one priority. At Bellwether, we take this very seriously, which is why every client gets a free will and power of attorney through our life and legacy promise. But estate planning isn't just about documents, it's about family. That's why we set up a family meeting to walk your loved ones through the plan. The last thing you want is confusion when you're no longer here. We also complete a step-by-step estate directory, which is a step-by-step guide for your family when the time comes. If you want one, just ask. Once that's done, we're on day 30 and you are ready to retire. Before you hand in your notice though, make sure you click on the link in the pinned comments to get your free retirement guide. And you might want to watch this next video on uncomfortable facts in retirement just to make sure you're fully prepared.